So setting up the meeting, buffering. All right. Okay, so it looks like we're live on YouTube. Jalisa, thank you so much for joining me. I'm hearing a little feedback, so give me 1 second to mute the other. Okay, that's taken care of.
Okay.
Like I cannot listen to myself the whole time.
I know, I
Um,
know.
Thank you so much for joining me on our first Movement Makers Live on YouTube Live for Ìpàdé. Just for anyone who's new and just tuning in to Ìpàdé, we're a meeting and event space located in DuPont Circle, Washington, D.C., designed intentionally for Black women and femmes of color, but open to all for venue rentals, for photography, and for gatherings. So, Jalisa, you've been to Ìpàdé. You're, I would say, a community member. You've received our Tana Fund. And just for everyone else, Jalisa is the founder of Booked Trips, which takes groups of people from page to place. So, Jalisa, tell us more about what you're doing at Book Trips and why you decided to start it.
Sure. So first, I'm just really excited to be in conversation today. I love Ìpàdé. The events there are always stellar. So I'm really excited to be connected in a deeper way. So I'm the founder of Book Trips, as you mentioned. So Book Trips, we create small group book inspired adventures for women. So we take people from the page to the place. So the pages of their favorite novels to the place that they're set in. And it's really travel based in storytelling. So how do we take the story of a place, its people, its culture, its music, and bring that to the forefront? So it's a deeper way to travel. And so the idea came to fruition. There's the long story as far as like when you look back, there are breadcrumbs that led to this moment. So I was always a super, super bookish kid. So I grew up in a small town, Geneva, New York, and upstate New York. And my family is really religious, Pentecostal, and the church is across the street from the public library. And my mom, the way I could get out of church service was to go to the library. So I was in the library quite
Too
often.
funny.
But that was my first passport. So being able to be exposed to different worlds and different girls that lived totally different lives than my life in a small town. And so that really became my connection to literature as a way of experiencing the world more broadly. And so that I feel like kernels of that were creating book trips. And I think during the pandemic, like a lot of people, there was this feeling of isolation and this feeling of, is this the right thing for me to be doing? So I had been working in the nonprofit and philanthropic sector for over a decade and was frankly getting a little burnt out on that work. So I wondered, what are other ways to tap into my passions for exploration, for philanthropy, for storytelling? And so book trips was the merging of a lot of things that I was really interested in. And so I was really passionate about bringing like-minded women together around the world to talk about books and ideas and all these things that really connect us, that are a little bit bigger. And so that was the founding story of book trips.
Awesome. I love it. I cannot wait to go on a trip. I love to read. I love to travel. Um, I was also a young avid reader, in the library every summer, doing all the reading programs, winning prizes. It, I think it's just such a great thing, a way to develop young people's creativity and imagination and thirst to see the rest of the world and to see what else is out there. So kudos to you for bringing that to life for people now, who get to travel, as adults to some of the places they probably read about as kids or even reading about now and getting to experience those things in real life. So will you tell us about some of your recent trips or maybe one trip that has stood out to you the most as being like the most impactful, or that really resonated strongly with your audience?
So this year we're going to Cape Town, South Africa, Mexico City, Mexico, and Accra, Ghana. And so I'm really excited about the upcoming trips. But recently we went to Bogota, Colombia, and we read Ingrid Rojas Contreras' book, The Man Who Could Move Who Could Move Clouds. And that was just the trip where I felt like my idea and the experience really, really aligned. So we used quotes from the book to inspire each day of our experiences. And so the book was really about a lot of things, but it was about memory and what we lose and what refuses to be forgotten. It's about what does it mean to be an indigenous person and really holding on to that history. And so for that experience, I thought that was really impactful because we got to partner with some local organizations. So a really big principle of book trips
Wow.
is that we partner with local artisans, guides, and restaurants for all of our experiences so that our tourism dollars stay in the place that we go. And so last year overall, we invested almost $32,000 in our local partners.
Wow.
So that was a really big impact for us. And then on the ground in Bogota, we got to do an indigenous bag making class with this woman from the Wayu tribe in Colombia. So they have these bags called mochila bags. So she taught us how to like thread them together. So that was a really impactful experience. We got to partner with Impulse Travel, which is a socially responsible tourism company there. And we got to learn really about the history of violence in Colombia, and then also who are the peace weavers, so the activists and artists and creatives who are creating a pathway towards peace from that. So partnering with them was a really impactful way to talk about Colombia beyond the mainstream media where you see the narco stories and things like that. But what does this look like for present people now who are really working towards peace? So that was really impactful for us. And I would say that was really what I want to do with book trips. So not just travel for the Instagram pictures, which is great, but also like how are
Right.
we investing in the local folks there and really learning and having an exchange of culture.
I love it. I love that it's so conscious as well. So it's not just about the people who are reading the books and signing up with you to go on these trips. It's about what footprint you're leaving or choosing not to leave in a particular place that you travel. So I really admire that. I also try to travel as consciously as possible, contributing to the local economy rather than, big corporations that might have a footprint in a certain country. So yeah, it's just amazing. The more I learn about what you're doing, I'm like more and more inspired. Um, I guess, for you, speaking of inspiration, being a movement maker, being someone that is innovating and leading the charge of an initiative, especially something that does things differently and that you have to be really intentional about, it can take a lot of energy. And I'm sure wrangling a group of travelers, if you're on these trips, hopefully you have support, but also it can just be a little bit tiring and to run a business. So tell us how you stay motivated and what inspires you to get up every day and do what you do.
Yeah, I think I'm still learning as far as like how do I maintain that energy because I am an introverted person, and so I think a lot of book trips is like how do we create small group travel experiences that cater towards folks who are not extroverted but still want to be connected to one another. And so what that looks like on the business side is like before trip prep and then my aftercare. And so like how am I nourishing myself before a trip as far as like not having a lot of work those 2 days beforehand so that I can come in really fresh. And then those 2 days after, it's really how do I get a massage or do yoga or do the things that restore me. So I definitely need the before and after as an introverted person. And to the help part, having really good on the ground partners has been an amazing, amazing thing, both to keep me motivated because I get to see folks who are really aligned in how they're trying to have an impact in the world, and I get to invest in their dream too. So I think that's the coolest thing about being an entrepreneur is not just about your dream, but you get to work with other folks in bringing their dream to life. So I think that keeps me motivated. That like this thing has an impact beyond me, and it's not just like a passion project, but it actually is having an impact on others. So I think that keeps me motivated. And then the travelers, I don't in my head, it was like, "Oh, this would be a cool idea to just, like, test out," and then a lot of people were interested, and I was like, "Oh,
Right.
I'm ready for that part." And so seeing women, like, all over the country and the world, so for our Mexico City trip, we have, travelers coming from Canada and South Africa, so, like, there's an international interest. So
Wow.
I didn't know that book trips was gonna get that big. I think that really keeps me motivated that this is not just a me thing, but this is something that
Mhm.
other people want and are finding value from. So we hear a lot from our travelers of they're looking for a community. And so this is a
Mhm.
way for them to meet people who care about the things that they do. So providing the container for conversations to happen, for people to experience a place in new ways, and that feeling of delight and awe that you get from traveling to a new
Mhm.
place, being able to facilitate that. I really love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to pick up on something you mentioned, which is community. And so I'm just curious, are there ways for people to connect after the trips? And for people who have been on separate trips with you to connect and stay in touch with each other, as travelers, as people who might have, shared experience having gone on a trip with you.
Yeah, that is something that's in the works because in my professional world, we always talk about alumni communities, but they take their own bucket of work and maintenance. But I would love for there to be like a chat or a group, whether it's like an online chat or something like that, where folks can stay connected. Currently, we do WhatsApp groups for each trip. So folks can continue to share things that they're reading or they're excited about in those. But I would love to have a more intentional way for folks to come together. So I think this year we're going to highlight an alumni like dinner. So we do the opening night of each of our trips is an opening book discussion and dinner. And so the menu and the curation of the table and playlist are all informed by the book. And so we usually do that on site during trips. But I'm hoping to bring that stateside as a way to bring some of the alumni folks together. And
Oh,
then,
very cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. And that's a interesting way of keeping people connected. When I asked the question, I was thinking, about like if you had a mighty network or a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group, but it's like, oh, we're creating community by gathering again, by sharing a meal, by coming together in person. That's awesome. Yeah.
But
I think
I
people would really.
definitely am thinking a lot about like what does the online space look like, especially as book trips grows and people are all over the country and the world. Like how can you really use a good online space? Do you have experience with that with Ipare?
I do. So during the pandemic, I tested Mighty Network, a Mighty Network group, which is really easy to use, kind of like plug and play. The platform's there set up, you don't have to build anything. Um, it didn't really work for me just because Ìpàdé hadn't existed at that time. It was just an idea. I was doing, lives, Zooms, virtual gatherings. And I was also asking for people to pay for the community
Mhm.
of something they, just had a little bit of experience with. So there was a learning curve for me with that experience, but I think it could be a good platform that works for you. Mighty Networks is pretty easy for anyone to use, and it's a different platform, so it's not like, oh, I don't like Facebook, or oh, I'm not on LinkedIn, or I don't like Slack, right? Because people have their own preferred,
Yes.
or like people are like WhatsApp, or I was in a Signal group from a travel experience, and I was like, no, this is not working for me. So you just have to also tap into your community and see what's going to work for them, and then try something. If it doesn't work, then quickly move on to the next thing. I was actually on a call with friends yesterday, um, and we were just talking about some new things that I'm going to do here at Ìpàdé, or how I'm going to switch things up. And I was like, yeah, I believe in rapid experimentation. Um, that's something I think that every business owner, if it's not a part of your philosophy, you should like be considering it. It's like, how do I test things quickly, see what the response is, and then continue to innovate and explore other options. So, yeah, I would say try the Mighty Network, try a Slack even. If people are like, nah, I can't do Slack, then
I feel like there's workplace trauma around Slack where people are like, I cannot hear that sound, the Slack notification sound. But I do
right.
think, speaking of Mighty Networks, I think the Colored Girls Liberation Lab, I think they're connected to Ipade. They have a really
Hmm.
good online group that I think uses Mighty Network. So I might check that out.
Yep, definitely. Um, okay, so you also mentioned self-care. One of the things that I want viewers to understand, a little bit more. Self-care has been this big conversation in the culture recently. And so it's kind of, it's played out. I don't think it's played out yet, but it's talked about in a way like, oh yeah, I've got to do self-care. And then people are trying to figure out what their self-care means to them. So I would love to hear what self-care means to you, and what some of your practices are that have been really re-energizing you and refueling you, especially after the trips.
Yeah. So for me, self care really is community care. How am I tapping into my community of folks to support me? Because I think sometimes entrepreneurship, especially in the early years, can be isolating. So, how am I asking for help when I need it? How am I using other folks as a sounding board for some ideas so they're not just in my head because I'm a ruminator? So, I think those things are self care. How am I doing fun things with my girls? Like, who's coming out with me to dance? Who's going, who's meeting up for coffee, like those things, staying in community with others, I think really helps me not to get too isolated, too in my head about things. Um, and as a recovering people pleaser, I think really tuning into like, what am I feeling in this moment? Because that was not something I was in practice of. It was always, what do other
Mm,
folks need? And how can I best perform or show up to please them? And so
mm,
self-care for me is really tuning into like, what am I feeling in this moment? What do I need in this moment? And that wasn't intentional practice, but now it really is like, is work the most important thing right now for me? Or do I need to take a break? Do I need to have set hours and boundaries, which is really hard when you're an entrepreneur because it can
mm,
turn into a 24/7 thing. I have a yoga practice that is really, really vital to my well-being. I think that movement practice for somebody who is a little bit more anxious energy, that
mhm,
really works well for me. Um, what else is my self-care practice? I think boundary work. People don't talk about it a lot, but I
mhm,
think boundary work is really important to my self-care practice because there's so many amazing opportunities, but learning about what is most aligned with my North Star and where I'm trying to go. So knowing when my guest is excited and aligned rather than it feels like a thing I should do, I think that's a form of self-care so that I'm not overextending and overcommitting to things.
I love that. Yeah. It's so important um to say no when you need to, regardless of what you believe the consequences might be, right? If that no is going to align you closer to your yes, things that you want to say yes to, then you've absolutely got to do it. But it is a growth process. It is, something that you have to continue practicing over and over. I found that, especially in the business, I have certain policies that through experience, I've had to implement those policies. We can call them boundaries, right? Um, and every time I go against my own policy, I regret it. I'm like,
Yep.
this is why I this is why I have it.
Yes,
And
yes.
I just should not have crossed that boundary. It's there for a reason. Um, so that's a really great point. As we wind down and start to wrap up, tell us what your future vision is for book trips. We've touched on it briefly, but I want to hear specifically your vision in relation to how people can support you and get closer to your vision.
Yeah. The vision part is a little challenging just because I used to be a very type A, like I have a 5, 10 year plan, and then the world teaches you that you can plan whatever you want, but it will throw you for a loop. So my mantra is to be clear with my intention and flexible with my approach. And so my intention for the business going forward is to really create ease and delight for myself and for my travelers. And so what that looks like in terms of the growth of the business is ease as a founder is support, like really building out a team. So in the next 5 years, I would love to build out a team of on the ground staff who can help with partnerships and traveler engagement on the ground. To the delight piece for book lovers, really stronger partnerships with publishers. My dream would be that as publishers are rolling out new releases, a part of that rollout process would be a book trip. So, as someone is writing about the work that they're doing in like Tokyo, Japan. I'm creating a book trip that brings together some of their most committed readers or things like that. So that's my pie in the sky growth, that feeling of delight and something that is out of the ordinary. I also think a lot about connection. So what are the networks of support that I can build with other folks so that we're all working in our zone of genius And so I really like the like planning and visioning portion. And so there might be someone else who's really good at translation or someone else who's really good at social media. So how am I building a collaborative of folks where we're sharing our
Mhm.
skill sets? I think that's a way to support and where I want to see growth. Specific ways folks can support. I'm really into bartering at
Mm.
at this time. So I'm really open to folks who want to barter their skills in fundraising or translation, or if you're really passionate about community engagement. I've been piloting bartering trip spots for folks who have that skill set. And so there's actually someone going to be helping out with social media um, on my Mexico City trip in exchange for a spot. And then for my Cape Town, South Africa trip, one of our travelers is really good at photography. So she got
Oh,
a reduction in the
wow.
trip price in exchange for doing some photography for the trip. So I really think there's a way to get out of a capitalist kind of mindset of paying for everything.
Mhm.
A lot of bartering opportunities that I'm really excited to get into.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I'm just so inspired hearing you talk about your vision and um words like ease and tapping into community and how you approach your work, because I think how we do the work that matters to us is as important as the work itself. um yeah, there's an approach, there's a way you do it that creates more fulfillment, like I said, more ease for you, pours into others that you meet along the way or who join you along the way of living your vision and getting to the next step. So again, I'm just smiling because I'm so happy for you. And like I said, I cannot wait to go on a trip. So with that said, tell us how people can sign up for a trip or get connected to book trips, follow you and support you.
Perfect. So book trips is www.booked, BOOKED, trips, TRIPS.com. And we're also at Booked Trips on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn as well. So I would say Instagram is the place where we're most likely to play. And then we have a monthly newsletter that we send out each month that has behind the scenes of our trips. We always send out a monthly guide, so a free guide to a city. So, how do you have a book inspired trip in a different city around the world? And then if you want to hear a little bit more about the founders experience, I share in the founders corner a little bit about behind the scenes of what is it like to have a startup. So if you're interested in that or book recommendations, the monthly newsletter is also a great way to stay connected.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jaleesa, for your time. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to the viewers and listeners for engaging with us. Feel free to connect to Books Trips and to Ìpàdé and stay tuned for our next Movement Makers